Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I am going to very quickly just read out all the changes coming to Destiny 2 in Season 21 for PvE, but I will not go too much into the technical stuff, just buffs, changes, and nerfs for the most part, and I will share some of my thoughts at the end. So let's get started. First, we have aspects getting fragment slots added from 1 to 2 for existing aspects. Those are Trapper's Ambush, Shatter Dive, and Gunpowder Gamble for Hunters, Bastion and Juggernaut for Titan, then Chaos Accelerant for Warlock. Next, we have all supers getting PvE damage resistance by about 20%, so you'll be harder to kill. Next up, we have Hunter supers getting their buffs. Both Golden Gun variants are getting 20%. Arc Staff is getting 20%. Spectral Blades is getting 35%, but the heavy attack will now weaken targets on hit, and they fixed an issue where right-hand Spectral Blades attacks fail to connect when attacking at maximum speed. Gathering Storm is getting direct impact damage versus players increased from 200 to 300. Delayed Lightning Strike damage versus players increased from 40 to 60. And it now deals increased damage versus Well of Radiance and Ward of Dawn. Next up, we have Titan Supers getting their buffs. Fists of Havoc light attack cost reduced from 8.5% to 6%. Heavy attack cost reduced from 18% to 12%. Increased heavy attack PvE damage by 33%. And heavy attacks will now blind targets near the center of the slam area. For Glacial Quake, they are increasing the Shiver Strike thrust speed while in super by 10%, and increased light attack damage by 20%. Sentinel Shield is getting a 20% damage buff. Hammer of Soul is getting a 10% damage buff. Burning Maul is getting a 10% damage buff. And it now creates a Sunspot on cast when Soul Invictus is equipped, and the heavy attack Cyclone now applies Scorch over time. Next up, we have Warlock supers getting their buffs. Nova Warp is getting a 15% damage buff. A fully charged attack now makes enemies volatile on hit. Nova Bomb is getting a 20% damage buff. Storm Trance is getting a 25% damage buff. Damage ramp while attacking now occurs more quickly, over 3 seconds now instead of 5, and landfall detonation and seekers now jolt targets. Chaos Reach is getting a 25% damage buff. Sustained damage on a single target now creates a jolting lightning strike at target's location. Increased damage resistance versus players from 40% to 50%, increased maximum strafe speed from 3.5 meters per second to 4.5 meters per second, and adjusted the super camera to avoid the player's body from blocking view of targets when strafing. Winter's Wrath is getting a 10% damage buff. Daybreak had its camera adjusted while in super to allow players to look down further and avoid visual effects from blocking view of targets when quickly moving. Next, we have some strand ability changes. For Hunter, Threaded Spike is getting increased projectile travel range before beginning to return to the player by 30%, increased damage versus PvE combatants by about 55%, slightly reduced speed of the dart as it returns to the player to make catching it easier, increased energy gain for catching the dart based on the number of enemies hit, now pierces Cabal Phalanx shields, and no longer prioritizes the catch action over the grapple melee if an enemy target is within grapple melee range. For Titans, Frenzied Blade is getting decreased cooldown based on how many melee charges the player has stored. At 0 charges, cooldown is reduced by 15%. At 2 charges, cooldown is reduced by 30%. For Warlocks, Arcane Needle is getting a decreased cooldown based on how many melee charges the player has stored. At 0 charges, cooldown is reduced by 15%. At 2 charges, cooldown is reduced by 30%. Increased projectile speed based on projectile's flight time. Initial velocity increased to 40 meters per second, up from 30. Final velocity increased to 70 meters per second, up from 60, and increased projectile tracking strength by about 10%. Next, for Strand in general, Grapple is getting reduced base cooldown from 105 seconds to 82 seconds. Reduced the minimum time between grapple activations from 2.5 seconds to 0.2 seconds. Threat of generation is getting reduced energy generation provided by some damage over time mechanics, and reduced energy regeneration provided by trace rifles by 36%. Next, we have some stasis tuning. For hunters, Withering Blade is getting increased projectile tracking search range on bounce versus players by 20% and increased maximum tracking strength by 12.5%. For Titans, Shiver Strike is getting maximum thrust while in flight increased by 16% and decreased maximum downward influence of gravity while in flight by 18%. For Warlocks, Frost Pulse now provides 2 meters of additional melee lunge range after activation for 1.2 seconds. Next, we have some subclass tunings. For Titans, Seismic Strike, Shield Bash, and Hammer Strike now costs 15% melee energy on activation when not hitting a target, and base cooldowns are now standardized at 91 seconds. Knockout lunge range reduced from 6.5 meters to 5.5 meters, and uncharged melee PvE damage bonus increased from 60% to 100%. Shield throw is getting increased base impact damage from 60 to 70, increased consistency of finding and adjusting initial trajectory toward a new target after a bounce. Throwing Hammer now adjusts its initial flight trajectory based on your aim assist target. For Hunters, Snare Bomb is getting increased PvE weaken duration on detonation from 4 seconds to 8 seconds. Gunpowder is getting a reduced cooldown from 12 seconds to 6 seconds. For Warlocks, Ball of Lightning got an increased 30% damage buff in PvE. Magnetic Grenade with Handheld Supernova is getting increased charged hold time from 3.2 seconds to 4.5 seconds. Next, we have subclass keyword changes. Scorch is getting increased stun time before stacks begin falling off from 3 seconds to 4.5 seconds on PvE combatants. Jolt is getting a reduced base PvE damage by 15% and reduced additional damage scalar versus major combatants in PvE by about 20%. Speed Booster is getting its bonus jump acceleration scalar reduced from 1.5 times to 1.25 times. It now activates while sprinting after 2.5 seconds, down from 3 seconds. Now lingers while the player is not sprinting for 2 seconds, up from 1.5 seconds. Next, we have new strand aspects for each class. Hunters get Threaded Spectre. Activate your class ability to leave behind a decoy woven from strand matter that draws the attention of nearby combatants. After taking significant damage or when combatants approach, the decoy detonates, dealing damage and releasing threadlings that seek out and attack nearby foes. Titans get Flèche Storm, I hope I'm saying that right. While sliding, activate your charged melee ability to leap into the air, knocking nearby targets away and dealing damage. While airborne, activate your charged melee again to launch a cluster of damaging, unraveling projectiles. Repeatedly activating melee will chain additional throws. So this melee kind of reminds me of the new Solar Titan melee that we have now. Warlocks get the Wanderer, tangles you throw attached to enemies and detonate into a suspending burst. Threadling final blows create a tangle. Next, they say that Season 21 will not have any power increase, so if you're already at Pinnacle Cap 1810, then you'll be at Pinnacle Cap for Season 21 as well. Next, we have some new info on how to apply Deep Sight to a weapon. To apply a Deep Sight to a weapon, you will need a new currency called Deep Sight Harmonizer. Non-raid weapons will cost 1 Harmonizer, while raid weapons will cost 15 spoils and 1 Harmonizer. Deep Sight Harmonizer can only be obtained from Season Pass rank rewards, 3 in the free pass, and 3 in the paid pass, and will not be obtained from any other form of activity in the game. For now, it is just staying in the Season Pass. This currency also does not stack, and you can only hold 1 in your inventory at a time. Weapons bought from Banshee and Zur will work for applying Deep Sight, but not on raid weapons bought from the final chest after beating the final boss in a raid. Next, they are adding raid exotic weapon drop rate increased chances for completing triumphs in the other raids. 1000 Voices from Last Wish, Eyes of Tomorrow from Deepstone Crypt, Collective Obligation from Vow of the Disciple, Vex Mythoclast from Vault of Glass, and Touch of Malice from King's Fall will all have the same treatment applied to them from what Root of Nightmares has done for players to increase their odds of getting their raid exotic to drop. Next, Finest Matterweave and Rainmaker are now going to no longer drop in the game and are getting deprecated. You can dismantle Finest Matterweaves to instantly get enhancement cores and 3000 Glimmer for each Rainmaker that you dismantle. Those are all the changes that we know about so far coming in Season 21 as far as PvE goes. There are a few things that I'm looking forward to. I like the aspects getting 2 fragment slots now from the ones that only had 1. I'm excited to try Shadow Dive and Gunpowder Gamble. The Golden Gun, Arc Staff, and Spectral Blade buffs are interesting and I can't wait to try them out to see if they will finally be as good as the other supers now. The Titan's heavy attack with Burning Maul applying Scorch is also something that seems fun and can potentially do really good boss DPS since it can cause ignitions now that it can apply Scorch. Chaos Reach has always been one of my favorite arc supers, but just didn't do as much damage as the other super for Warlocks, so I'm really excited for that buff. The Threaded Spike buff is good for Hunters because that melee ability just did very little damage, so hopefully now it is actually as good as the other strand melee abilities. Finally, the last one I'm going to point out is the raid exotic drop changes for the other raids. Being able to complete triumphs in the raids to get an increased chance for the raid exotic to drop is such a good change. I ran Vow about 15 times and King's Fall about 30 times and never got the raid exotics to drop, so I just gave up on them. This change will surely bring me back to complete those raids and the triumphs to hopefully get the weapons to drop. That is going to be it for me. You guys let me know what changes you are most excited for in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.